Hey everybody, Jason Blaha here with Ice Cream Fitness. Again, I'm just drinking my morning coffee and relaxing in my robe, and I thought I'd give you guys a video this morning. All right, today I want to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, testosterone. Well, let me give you guys a couple poses first. All right, testosterone is again, it's very romanticized. It's obviously very associated with everything from sex drive to being masculine to gaining muscle, losing fat. And I mean, and we know that in the bodybuilding world, it's romanticized for good reason. Um, but there's a lot of confusion out there. There's so much supplementation out there designed to boost testosterone levels and do these various things, and people discuss various methods to elevate testosterone production in the hopes of gaining performance and gaining muscle mass. And this comes from the fact that we know that anabolic steroids work. I mean, we've known for 50 years that anabolic steroids work. They make you bigger, they make you stronger, they push people beyond their natural limits. And so what people oftentimes try to do is they want to try to harness a fraction of the same effect, um, without actually taking the plunge and sticking a needle in their glutes. So you see a lot of these products out there, and trying to boost testosterone levels. Um, and the interesting thing is, what we start to see when we research it, because again, I did a lot of research into, because I have quite a bit of a psych background also. At the university level, I was very, very personally interested in social factors and behavioral factors that boost testosterone levels. And I mean, so I actually personally spent a lot of time researching that while I was at university. And there are a lot of things you'd be surprised what will spike and drop your testosterone levels as far as actual social behavior and things. It's really quite an interesting subject. The problem is though is that these are always acute responses. Something might boost your testosterone 40 or 50%, but then it drops back off to baseline a couple hours later. And I mean, and it's literally everything from winning a chess match to your candidate winning or losing an election, or rooting for a team that wins or loses will actually have positives and negatives on your testosterone levels for a short period of time. Very, very measurable. The problem is though is that when we're discussing for bodybuilding, muscle building purposes, fat gain, fat loss, and things like that, acute hormone responses don't seem to do jack shit. They seem to have no impact whatsoever. So unless you can get something that prolongs uh, the production of one of these hormones or consistently lowers the production of something else that you're concerned with, there doesn't seem to be any real merit to us in bodybuilding. Oh, let me jump back over to one other thing first. It's actually, there's recent research even coming out showing that testosterone production increase as a result of even resistance training doesn't seem to elicit an anabolic response in the body, that the actual training itself does, and the growth stimulated, but the actual testosterone produced as a result of it doesn't seem, or the growth hormone doesn't seem to actually directly contribute to anabolism because it's not consistently elevated long enough to do so. So, I mean, I don't think the research is conclusive there yet, but there is definitely some coming out at this point in the last year showing that it doesn't really seem to actually directly induce more of an anabolic response, which is, pretty interesting. All right, so then we jump over to these products. And what we know is that the vast majority of testosterone boosting products don't work. They don't do anything. A lot of these testosterone boosters, or some of them, they give you a little temporary boost and then it drops right back down, and it's not going to make any difference whatsoever, any of these herbs. Um, the most popular one at the moment, though, that seems to have a little research is, of course, D-aspartic acid, or known as DDA. The problem with this product is, is that there's a bit of animal research on it, but we only have one human study looking into it, and uh, yeah, there was like a 40% increase in testosterone in these Italian athletes. And the problem is that this hasn't been replicated in anyone else. And to me, there's a couple of things that were suspicious. I noticed that the average testosterone levels of these men were actually a little on the low side for athletic, healthy young men, which again suggests to me that these athletes had a somewhat suppressed HTPA from probably exogenous testosterone or steroid use. And so they were a little lower on average than I would expect. So at least some of them might have had, suppressed HTPA levels. Um, and so that being said, they took something like the DDA and it boosted them up slightly, but it didn't boost them outside of the normal range. I mean, even the average testosterone that we saw in these individuals, they went from being below average to, middle to slightly middle high average. I mean, these guys weren't anywhere near the top of the scale of even what a healthy active 18-year-old athlete would be producing even after the DDA. They were below the upper threshold of what we see. Um, in fact, when I was 22 and had my testosterone pulled, my testosterone levels naturally were considerably higher than any of the test subjects had from the study after their DDA. So, I mean, put that into perspective. I mean, mine was a full 25% higher than any one of those test subjects showed. And that's pretty common among, young athletes. So, and the other issue you see with that is that it hasn't been replicated in other studies yet. Also, a point of consideration with that is that it seemed to elevate estrogen an actual higher percentage than it did testosterone. And again, this is something you see guys complaining about who start taking the DDA, is that, a few of them, I've heard guys claim they're getting gyno from it, and things like that. And it's oftentimes countered with, an aromatase inhibitor. But we know over the counter aromatase inhibitors are fucking worthless. I mean, anyone who's studied the subject knows that they're complete garbage. So some of these guys are then turning to pharmaceutical um, grade ones because they're actually cheaper than the over-the-counter ones and they're easy to get. I mean, anybody can get their hands on these things on an aromatase inhibitor for, a fifth of the price of this over-the-counter stuff. And in some countries, even the U.S., are not even legal to possess. So people do that. The problem with doing that is that most pharmaceutical grade AIs, when given to a male, actually increase testosterone production more than the DDA does on top of the estrogen suppression. So then the guys are going and they're stacking, a pharmaceutical grade drug with their over-the-counter supplement that's actually doing more than the supplement is, and then they get a little bit of progress, and then they think that the DDA was responsible for their progress, when in fact the actual AI probably did more for them than the DDA, the aromatase inhibitor did. So, and again, it kind of really begs the question of, if these guys, so many people romanticize this concept of being natural, but they want to manipulate their hormone levels with synthetic compounds. And so again, I really have to question their logic. I mean, are you natural or are you not? If you're natural, you don't put any synthetic compounds in your body to manipulate your hormone production. You might take a few supplements, but you don't take anything that's classified as a drug, and you certainly aren't going to be manipulating your hormone production. And if you are pretending to be natural or even playing the natural game, is just fucking asinine. Take the fucking plunge and save yourself some money if that's what you're doing, and just use the real thing. It's just, I don't know why guys even bother with this. And I mean, and the reason for it being, I mean, even the price of DDA, which we're going to look at in just a minute, what happens when hormone levels are impacted exogenously. It's not very cost effective. It's insanely overpriced. I mean, most tubs that I'm seeing online for a month's supply of DDA for like concentrated DDA is like $30 a month. I mean, I hate to break it to you, but testosterone costs a hell of a lot less than that. So again, these people are basically still not natural. They're taking all the risk of a low dose of testosterone, literally all of the risk, the elevated estrogen, other things, but they're paying more money for it. And again, I think it's because they're romanticizing the fact that if they can boost their hormone levels in one way and not another, that they're still natural. And it's insane. All right, so what happens when we study various manipulations in hormones so that we really get an idea of what testosterone does in the body? Well, obviously we've had tons of bodybuilders and athletes for decades who have been studying this and writing about it and putting on the internet who get blood work done do this under the care of doctors. It's pretty well understood in the athletic community, but not always in the direct open science. However, that started changing, I guess, around a decade and a half ago. You know, as some restrictions loosened up in the U.S. on it, there have been more research done on superlogical doses of these compounds and what they actually do in the body and healthy young men. And I'll link one study down in the comments for you guys to look at, and I'm going to discuss the levels a little bit and what they do for testosterone. All right. When we look at this study, we see, you know, people given a number of different doses. You see them going as low as, like, you know, 25 milligrams a week these are long chain estered once a week depot shots, so that they keep your testosterone levels elevated, not the normal, you know, undulating levels that you would have with your normal production. These are going to be constant levels through the use of a depot, which actually is the opposite of the acute responses you're getting. This is what happens when levels are elevated and consistently kept high exogenously and synthetically. And what we see is, you know, 25 milligrams once a week. We see some research, some data on it for 50 milligrams. Then we see 125, which now we're starting to get somewhere, because generally for people who are on hormone replacement therapy, the starting dose is usually around 100 milligrams once a week or 200 milligrams every 2 weeks. So generally an average of about 100 milligrams a week is the general starting amount for HRT, and some doctors will go as high as 200 milligrams for some patients. But again, that's rare exceptions, and that is going to put anybody above the normal physiological range, even if you're producing nearly zero. So, but some doctors will still do that for some patients. But we see the 125, and then we see 300 milligrams, and then they actually ran it at 600 milligrams. So again, it puts in perspective, you know, what the doctors are willing to study, and they ran all of these for 20 weeks. What's interestingly enough, obviously the low dose groups, we saw no side effects. Some of them actually had lower testosterone than when they started, which again is to be expected if you understand the negative feedback loop. But when we see the 125, that's where things started to get interesting, because what we saw there is that we saw across the board these individuals on average who are, you know, in the low 500s bump up to the high 500s, almost 600 nanograms per deciliter on this, which means their testosterone levels rose about 10 to 15% constant, meaning they were still in the normal range, but they were, you know, nice high end. And unlike the DDA studies, we don't know all that. The only DDA study we have showing it pushing up into that range, we don't know if they were still peaking and spiking, you know, throughout the day, which like they would do normally, or if they were constantly elevated. And if they weren't constantly elevated, you're not necessarily going to see the response. And it was only a 12-day study. So you don't know that if after 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks of this DDA, if they didn't completely return to baseline. Whereas, you know, with this, we know that they didn't. And when these men were consistently elevated up to, you know, around 600 nanograms per deciliter and kept there with no undulation, you know, due to natural production, because again, it's a long-acting depot injection. All of these men, the average gain, they gained around a little over, I want to say it was like 3 kilograms of muscle mass over this 20 weeks. Now that doesn't seem like a lot, but when you consider this is purely from the addition of just a constant elevated boosted testosterone level, I mean, we're talking about around 7 pounds of muscle gain over 20 weeks. That's not insignificant. So again, we kind of see what happens when levels are just kept constant and high, not acute responses. Interestingly enough, when they go, we see exactly what we see in the bodybuilding world and in the sports world when they went to 300 milligrams, and testosterone levels went to, you know, ranging up to about 1,300 to 1,400 nanograms per deciliter. We saw the general almost the diminished returns and gains in muscle mass. Generally speaking, what's always been noted in the athletic world is that anytime someone doubles the dose of testosterone or whatever they're using, or they doubled their blood serum testosterone levels, they see about a 50% increase in their progress in muscle gains. And and that's pretty normal. So basically, every time they double their testosterone level, they see about 50% more improvement, not 100%. It's not linear; it's diminished returns. And this research actually showed exactly what's been noted in the real world. When they go to the 300, which is a little over double what they were on, you saw about 60% more muscle gain. They gained a little over 5 kilograms of muscle, so they went from like 3 to 5. And now you're kind of getting somewhere. This is like 12 pounds of muscle gain in 20 weeks. All right, that's very significant. We're now seeing muscle gains at that point that are above what you would normally see for anyone other than an absolute noob making noob gains. So and this is still, that's a very conservative amount. It's most unfortunately the way that this has gone today. Most starting users actually start with more than that. The first time they go and put an exogenous hormone into their body, they actually wouldn't even consider a dose that low. But when you look at this research, it actually produced spectacular gains on average in these individuals with no real side effects, no other than a little bit of acne. Their cholesterol stayed fine. They didn't suffer any problems from it. And then we saw the same thing again, on all of these when they go to 600. So they double it again. And then these individuals saw a little over 7 kilos of muscle gain. So again, they doubled it and it improved results by about 50%. Of course, in this group, then we started seeing cholesterol problems. You started seeing actual, a shift in lipid profile. You started seeing some potential negative health markers in these healthy young men when they put them on this dose. I mean, and it's nothing to be extremely alarmed about there, but it is noted. So when you start looking at these things, you get an idea of what happens when hormone levels are boosted exogenously. And the problem with what we see with people, using these over-the-counter products like this or this DDA is that, I don't know, it seems like they're trying to achieve this similar effect, but they're going to fall short. They're spending a lot of money, but they're effectively doing the same thing and taking the same risk that people who just use regular testosterone are, and they're really they're risking the same side effects. They're risking all of the same problems, but they're getting an inferior. They're getting no results. They're taking these risks. They're getting no results, and they're still manipulating their hormone levels. They're trying to manipulate their hormone levels with a synthetic compound. And I don't know. I mean, to me, I don't understand why these people are thinking that they're still actually natural, or that what they're doing is would constitute natural bodybuilding at that point. When you start trying to manipulate your hormone production with a synthetically produced product, in my opinion, you're not natural. And I don't judge. I mean, people can do what they want, but I mean, it's just when people are doing that, and a lot of them are actually doing it because they still consider themselves natural. And I'll just be frank with you: if you're trying to manipulate your hormones with a synthetically produced product like that, you're not natural. You're not natural. It just is what it is. When comparing exogenous, hormone use with natural production, and the differences of, again, we don't see in studies, we just don't see when testosterone levels are acutely tampered with through different activity, we don't see an anabolic effect like we do with exogenous use. We just don't, and the research just doesn't support that there's a benefit. So I would tell you that the only people who should be overly concerned with their testosterone levels are the people who are injecting it directly. And outside of that, if you're not seeing signs of low testosterone levels, in which case, if you are, you need to go see an endocrinologist. You need to see a doctor for this. Don't take it into your own hands. You know, go see a doctor, get some blood work done, talk to an endocrinologist, and see what they suggest. And outside of that, really all you should be focused on as far as your normal testosterone production, what's going to affect you is getting all of your micronutrients in your diet, making sure you're getting enough dietary fat. And again, I point that out in this video over here. Make sure that you're getting enough dietary fat, and make sure that you're lifting heavy weights. And that's really all you need to worry about. And leave manipulating testosterone levels to the guys who are going to be synthetically enhanced. Leave that to the steroid users. If you're not doing that, you really just don't need to be worried about it. It's not something that you should waste your time worried about, or that you should be spending money on products trying to manipulate. You're not making efficient use of your time. You're wasting your time. You're not going to get the results you're looking for. Again, I hope this video was informative. That's really all I have to say on that today. Let me give you guys another pose, and I'll talk to you next time.